getting my war hammers out. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis, welcome back to KOTN. I was like, oh, wait, what are we talking about today? I need to get out there's still a price tag on one of my war hammers. I need to get out all the weapons because we're taking on the SEC today, Bill Landis. Are we not? Are we not?
I'm weaponless over here, so I hope I'm okay.
I told you, Bill. What did I say? Yeah. I said, Bill, can you please come to my house this weekend and pick up your Warhammer? Because we're going to use it. Now, just so people know, this is like a movie Warhammer. So when I say I want to hit Greg Sankey in the head with my Warhammer, it's just in fun. So I want to say this. What we are going to do is talk about, we gave ourselves a couple days to digest the honkitude of last week at SEC spring meetings. And what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about what the SEC said, but like not specifically. We're not going to say like, did Mike Elko, the Texas A&M coach, say a more ridiculous thing than Lane Kiffin, the Ole Miss coach, than Kalen DeBoer, the Alabama coach, rank the ridiculous things said by SEC people? We're not doing that. Because as I think we have reminded people a little bit, Bill, you and I are working on a project, and the project that we are working on, we are knee-deep in research and writing around the idea that the South took over college football, but also the North allowed it to happen. And that the fact that you and I are talking about that on an almost daily basis off of this show at the moment, I think is informing the conversation we're going to have today. Because it's not just that the SEC wouldn't stop talking last week. It's that I'm not even sure the Big Ten still exists as a conference right now. And that also is part of this discussion, is it not?
Yeah, a huge part of the project we're working on is about perception. And we got a pretty strong reminder of, I think, how that happens last week with what was going on with the SEC. I thought you were going to say that we're not doing a show ranking all the silly things that were said in Destin, Florida, because we only have 2 shows, 90 minutes each per week, and that's not enough time to do it.
I think maybe that if we had like a KOTN marching band, I could learn to twirl the Warhammer at the front of the band. When we have our parade, we're going to have parades. I'll twirl Warhammers. It's so much stuff. But it's so many silly things that were said, Bill. Right. And perception, we want to have a conversation about how perception affects reality. But the last thing I'll say before we get into our conversation is this. It is not useful to hate people. It is not good for your heart. It is not good for your mental health. It is not good for society. It is just not a great way to go about your life. So I don't hate people. I try not to. Let me back that up. I try not to hate people. So I don't want to come on here and act like or say that I hate people, that I hate the people in the SEC. I just hate everything they say and everything they stand for. So can we separate those two things? You
can always separate the art from the artist. Yeah.
They may go home and be lovely mothers and fathers and husbands and wives and members of society and part of the local school board. They might be building children's playgrounds. I don't know. But when they talked last week, I wanted to drive south and run them through with this thing. Oh, my God. Shut your holes. They're awful. But just as frustrating. And are you and I professional college football journalists with a focus on the North and the Big Ten?
I would say that is an accurate description of us both, yes.
Is it true that a thing we said last week is, when are the Big Ten meetings? Or is it something that I said last week? As the SEC was honking away, is that something that I asked you? Hey, is the Big Ten going to do this? Did I ask you that question?
Yeah, something to the effect of like, does the Big Ten have something like this? And if so, when is it?
And they already happened.
Uh-huh.
And nobody knew it. And that's where we're going to start. They were held So the SEC was last week. I guess the Big Ten was the week before in Ranchos Palos Verdes, California, which, as you and I know, is the heart of Big Ten country. And
also,
I didn't see any coverage of it at all. I did find an athletic story by Scott Docterman from last year with a Ranchos Palos Verdes dateline, and I looked, and I think he only wrote one story, and he referenced in there. Let me find the sentence here. Talking about the 100 administrators, university leaders, faculty reps, and head coaches from the Big Ten's 18 members. He said those officials were sequestered with security for every function, ranging from outdoor meals to friendly mixers. So I kind of got the vibe that Scott Docterman, and I didn't ask Scott about this, went to California to cover the Big Ten meetings, and they had a bunch of security guards tell them, like, get out of here. Mm-hmm. And he's as good of a Big Ten writer as exists in the world. Meanwhile, it was a beach party. Greg Sankey, I think they took their shirts off and played Top Gun volleyball. I think they roasted a pig.
Feinbaum was suitless. He was sans suit. That's how laid back the vibes were. He was wearing a regular old polo shirt on the beach.
Would I get arrested if I ran onto the Feinbaum set while he was suitless and attacked him with a foam warhammer?
Probably. I would think so, yes.
They're just running SEC media members through the beaches in the background, and they're just having constant conversations about, like, got to tell you, SEC is great at this, aren't they? And the Big Ten stinks. So Steven Godfrey is going to join us a little bit later to give us a little bit more of the Southern perspective on this, because he has a good handle on how they think down there. Why is the Big Ten so silent? Because our frustration immediately jumped to that. And I will say this was like a nesting doll of Twitter aggravation for me. Mm-hmm. It started with this. So I'll be honest about this. I was like, I don't even know if they have meetings. So I texted our good buddy, Adam Rittenberg, who is a great national college football writer, but certainly has his roots in the Big Ten. And I was just kind of like, hey, I don't like, what's the deal with this? And he texted back and said, they had him last week. Then later that day, Adam Rittenberg tweeted, worth saying, no league dominates the media discussion like the SEC. A whole week of media at the spring meetings, while the Big Ten did none at its meetings last week. Smart on the SEC's part, especially coming off of a season where the league was objectively a bit down. Then Peter Burns of ESPN and the SEC Network responded to that by saying, the Big Ten is quiet because they understand over half of their league is hot garbage and only prop up the small amount of true quality contenders they have. They run a highly successful CFB Ponzi scheme. I'd like to amend my previous statement. If I go anywhere and hit somebody with a foam warhammer, it's going to be Peter Burns. And it's just sports. It's just foam. I don't actually want to get in a fight with him. He is so aggravating. He is the number one SEC aggravator, even above Feinbaum for me. And then Scott Docterman comes on top of Peter Burns and says, the Big Ten is way too quiet. That needs to change. Tony Batiti, the commissioner, needs to state his goals publicly or he'll lose every proposal. But the Big Ten was 5-1 against the SEC in the postseason, and the closest margin of victory was the SEC's lone win. That's one hell of a Ponzi scheme. So we have smart journalists who know the Big Ten, who cover this league, who are willing to factually state things about why the Big Ten is kind of good at what they're doing right now. And they are saying that the Big Ten needs to be more public about this. And it feels like they believe the Big Ten is losing the PR war. And you and I certainly believe the Big Ten is losing the PR war here in a way that actually matters. Yes?
I think so. The other side of the coin, I suppose, is you could say, well, the SEC in doing what it did last week opened itself up to being made fun of at different points by people like us. And that's true. That's always sort of going to come with the territory, I suppose. But the SEC also, I think, seemed to position itself rather strongly, I guess, when it comes to trying to shape the future of the sport while the Big Ten remains silent. So I think the perception of that matters. I think like Scott Docterman in particular made a very good point about Tony Petitti needing to be out there and sort of owning what he thinks is the correct course of action for college football in a public way, rather than only relying on sort of like backroom dealings and anonymous sources and stories sometimes. It's not like Greg Sankey was out there saying like, this is what it should be, but at least you could kind of put a face to whatever was being said about the playoff conversation. Whereas like from the Big Ten perspective, that's not happening. So it feels to me like maybe the Big Ten is a little too willing at the moment to just sort of rest on the fact that it was better on the field than the SEC was last year, without understanding that once you're good, once you have put yourself in that position, you then go out and kind of pound your chest a little bit. And the SEC has always done that. Whether you like it or not, they've always done it, even when it's maybe not warranted. And the Big Ten, I don't think, has ever quite figured that out, but it is especially noticeable now that the on-field results would warrant the Big Ten doing that, and they're still not doing it.
So we're fine on content. You and I can find plenty of things to talk about year round. So this is not a content discussion, but I think it actually does matter, because in the modern era, the Big Ten is good at two things right now in college football. They're good at making money. They make money as well or even better than the SEC. And now they're pretty good on the field. And I can maybe understand the instinct to rest on that, but that's not what it's about only. This is not a sport that no sport only exists to make money and win games on the field, because you have a season, but your fans want more. And the SEC treats this like the NFL does, which the NFL has made professional football a 365-day-a-year sport. And they make a big deal out of everything. And the SEC acts like that. It feels like the Big Ten acts like Major League Baseball, that like you play and then the World Series is over, and then like you go away for 3 or 4 months and you come back and you have spring training, and that you're a season. And I think there's a tangible aspect that matters to that, I think you owe something to your fans, to give them enjoyment, to give them something to be fired up about, to feed their flames, especially when somebody else is doing it. It's like, oh, should we just react to the SEC? Yeah. This is one of those, oh, don't jump off a bridge just because somebody else. Yeah, well, actually do it. Just because the SEC did it, should the Big Ten do it? The answer is yes. The answer to that is yes. But then I actually think, Bill, there's a tangible thing that if you stoke the fires year round and you give your fans extra reason, remind them to have pride in their programs and pride in their conference and pride in their region and pride in the North, maybe that helps them open up the checkbook for NIL. So maybe if you're really thinking we're making money and we're winning games, what else is there? Well, if you play the game a little bit more, if you play the PR game, it might help you make more money, which might help you win more games. But I would argue, even if it doesn't, you owe something to your fans. And to recede and be silent and sit in the shadows and let a week-long beach extravaganza from your frenemy take over college football while you had a cocktail party in Southern California that nobody knew about, it's an abdication of responsibility in the modern era of sport. And that the Big Ten hired a TV guy, and that they are failing at this, blows my mind. Because there has been a time, Jim Delaney back in the day would get out and say stuff. And I think I maybe only went once. The Big Ten used to have its spring meetings in Chicago. And I went in 2011 when all this stuff was happening around Ohio State. And, you know, it was like you kind of needed to be there because then on Memorial Day, Jim Tressel wasn't the head coach of Ohio State anymore. So they must have been earlier in May. And we were sitting in hallways waiting by elevators, you know, and then Jim Delaney would come and people would, you know, 10 or 12 reporters there would gather around him and you'd do a thing. Greg Sankey's at a podium with an SEC backdrop talking like for 4 straight days. Like they have a public facing idea about this. So, but when Jim Delaney used to do it, it felt like Jim Delaney would get out there to say, well, we can't give up the Rose Bowl. Well, if you want to pay players, we'll go Division III. He was getting out there to make, he was getting out there in a modern way to make traditional conservative Big Ten points. And now that the Big Ten has caught up to the sport and is winning and is aggressive and is expanding and is keeping up with the SEC in every way like that, now they're silent. And I think it's a bad look. I think it's frustrating for the fans, but I actually think it has the chance to negatively affect the Big Ten and what they want college football to look like in the future.
I think it might affect it because the Big Ten and the SEC still control the future of the playoff, right? Ultimately, it comes down to what those two like, and we'll talk more about that. Like the Big 12 and ACC can put themselves, I guess, in whatever camp they want to. It doesn't really matter. So I don't know that the Big Ten is ceding power in that way, but there's a window here, and like the Big Ten makes a ton of money. The Big Ten makes more money, right, than the SEC. Like. It's been interesting to me to hear Greg Sankey positioned over the last like 7 to 10 days or whatever as like the most powerful man in college athletics. Like I've heard that on several podcasts. But I don't know that like he should be or that he actually is. But like Tony Petitti in the Big Ten and doing nothing have like just like created that vacuum for people to still kind of believe that, when I think the Big Ten could and should position itself at the very least as the equal to it and perhaps even something greater than that. Given the financials of it, I do wonder if part of it is maybe an assumption by the Big Ten that their fans just wouldn't care about something like this. Like there's more pro sports. People are into the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs. They're going on vacation because you don't typically vacation in the part of the country where most Big Ten programs are. So maybe this isn't right for the Big Ten and it makes more sense for the SEC. I don't know that I would agree with that, but I wouldn't agree with that, but I also would not be surprised if that were how the Big Ten was thinking about this.
Is this our fault? if we are trying to lead a Northern revolution, are we complaining about a thing that we should change? You want to go to Ranchos Palo Verdes next year and camp out at the cocktail parties with a couple of swords and see if we can get guys to come on our show? Actually, I actually think we should. Yeah, I feel bad. I feel like I blew it. That I was like, hey, maybe we should go. You know, they're all down at the beach. Every reporter you can think of was at SEC Media Days, national and local. I was watching again the Greg Sankey first news conference from the first night, and I heard a Pete Thamel question and I heard a Pat Forty question. Maybe I should have been there too. Maybe I need to bring my swords to Destin, because I do feel like, and not Pete and Pat, but there were a lot of SEC media. There was like a guy who was basically yelling at Greg Sankey, and those are my favorite kind of reporters who are so angry on their own behalf because they're fans more than they are reporters, that they then yell at the people in charge because their own personal feelings are hurt. And this guy was basically yelling at Greg Sankey about auto bids, about, is it going to cost the SEC bids? And Greg Sankey was like, are you going to let me answer the question or not? And so Greg Sankey is like in a quarter zip, came across as sort of like the voice of reason, and he speaks very softly, but they still managed in like a very sort of, they still managed to drum up a lot of angst and discussion in the sport. And we see Turkey Bass and other people in the comments right now saying, was it good? Just because the SEC talked, do they actually help themselves? And is the Big Ten doing something right by staying quiet? We're going to get to that. And I think I understand that question and I understand that point, but we'll get to that. Let's transition to a couple other things. Auto bids. This is a specific part of the discussion that actually this is beyond PR. This is a very specific part of how the college football playoff is going to work in the future. And as you said, it's now in the rules of the Big Ten and the SEC and the playoff that like the Big Ten and the SEC kind of get to determine this. There had been a proposal, 4 automatic bids each for the Big Ten and the SEC, 2 each for the Big 12 and the ACC, 1 for the best group of 5 of them, 3 at large. Now that has turned this week towards just the 5 automatic bids, the 4 conference champs and the best group of 5, and then 11 at large. And it feels like the SEC is divided maybe between coaches and head coaches, but between ADs and head coaches. But the main thing that Greg Sankey said is that conversation of whether there should be more auto bids is tied to whether the SEC is going to move to a 9-game conference schedule. And I'll let you talk about this first. It's a little complicated. I think the entire auto bid conversation everybody has it entirely wrong, including Brett Yormark, the Big 12 commissioner, who then came out in favor of the 5+11, only one auto bid for the conference champs, and that's it, because they said the Big 12 wants to earn it on the field. I think the ACC backed the same thing. You're nuts. And why people can't accept reality blows my mind. But this is a thing that matters to fans and matters to teams and matters to the sport. What do you think of this conversation? The auto bids versus 11 at large. And then and I'm curious to land where you are before I get my swords out again.
Well, my personal preference, I actually don't love auto bids, but I understand maybe why they're necessary. Like I want a playoff that's like all 10 conference champs and then figure it out from there. Like I'm the wrong person to ask about what my personal preference is, I guess, because it's never going to happen. It is interesting to me that seemingly the Big 12 and the ACC have landed on the idea that the perception of accepting 2 auto bids and thus sort of like admitting you are lesser than the Big 10 and the ACC, or Big 10 and the SEC, is worse than what is likely to be the reality of, more often than not, probably not getting 2 teams into the field. But as long as you're like putting up the fight and saying, you know, we should be respected on a similar level, that's more important than actually getting more than 1 team into the field. I understand why they feel that way. I don't know that it's good business to do that. I haven't gone back and looked through all the playoffs. And like last year in that system, the Big 12 would have only gotten 1 team in, and the ACC would have gotten 3. And I think in 2023, the ACC would have gotten 1 and the Big 12 would have gotten 2. So like, it's not really good for either of them. I don't know the history of that. I would assume that was more often than not the case. So I think it's dumb. Like I said a couple of shows ago that Yormark should just like accept his 2 bids and kind of be happy with it. Because I wouldn't want to trade feeling better about myself for only having 1 team in the playoff field every year. And like maybe every 4 years you get 2 or 3 and you feel better about that. But I would want a guaranteed 2 in the field every year if I were those 2 conferences, because I don't think otherwise they would be getting that if they opened it up to having 11 at-large bids, because the Big 10 and the SEC obviously and Notre Dame are going to dominate that more than likely year over year.
The entire auto bid conversation to me is about the 2, not about the 4. It's about getting 2 guaranteed for the Big 12 and the ACC. And then the only way you're going to do that is by giving the SEC and the Big 10 4, because the SEC and the Big 10 aren't going to agree to 3-3-2-2. So
right.
I feel like there's been such a focus on the 4. Oh, what if the SEC and the Big 10 don't earn that or don't deserve that in a 16-team playoff? It's very, very, very rarely going to be the case that they don't earn and deserve those 4. So it's a good trade-off to get the 2 for the Big 12 and the ACC. And I will give you the example of last year. BYU last year, as a team that finished in a 4-way tie for first in the Big 12, but did not make the Big 12 championship game, had a win over a playoff team in SMU, had a good win over Kansas State, lost to another playoff team in Arizona State in a game where they were down 5 and had the ball across midfield in the final minute with a chance to drive for the win and didn't quite do it, and then also lost a close game to Kansas. So they had 2 losses, a win over a playoff team, and then a banger loss to another playoff team. They finished 17th in the final playoff rankings. They had 0 discussion as a legitimate playoff team. They finished behind 5 SEC teams in the final playoff rankings, including 3 SEC teams with 3 losses as a 2-loss BYU. They were an afterthought as the second Big 12 team. And then, by the way, they got to their bowl game and then just happened to play another Big 12 team that they hadn't played in the regular season in Colorado, who was playing Travis Hunter and Shadur Sanders, and they blew their doors off. While Ole Miss went and lost a bowl game to Illinois, South Carolina went and lost a bowl game to Illinois, and Alabama went and lost a bowl game to Michigan. And then BYU was like, no, yeah, we're actually proving how good we are. And they did earn it. They at least earned, Bill, the right to be in the thick of the discussion, I believe, by what they did on the field. And they weren't in it at all. And that Brett Yormark would be in favor of a system where BYU has to fight for that second spot. And then now you're thinking, well, let's make sure we get in the third. Let's see if we get a chance to the third spot. There's still 3 at large in the auto bid thing. You still could get that third spot. But what's going to happen is that the Big Ten and the SEC, especially the SEC, because there's still bias there, are going to dominate that committee conversation just like they did last year. And you're going to be begging for a second far more than you're going to be thinking you have a chance for a third or a fourth. And I think the ACC and the Big 12 staring at an auto bid selection where they would get guaranteed 2 and not embracing that is malpractice. It's absolute malpractice. And I thought it when it happened. And now it turns out, now the SEC doesn't even want that because they're trying to figure out how they can get 7. And if they want 6 or 7, guess what that means? That means 1 for the Big 12. So this is so frustrating to me. And there was such an immediate knee-jerk reaction in the sport to auto bids. Well, how dare they? How dare the Big Ten and the SEC try to guarantee themselves? It's about the 2, you ding-dongs. It's 4. I don't want to call the Big 12 and the ACC little guys, but you can't lose Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC and not act like they're bigger than you. Doesn't mean the football, we have to live in the world. I don't have to kiss the Big 12's butt to get them to realize they should grab 2 auto bids. And frankly, I don't give 2 hoots about most of the ACC. Although I do want Pitt and Syracuse and Boston College to have a chance at this. So I do care. I do care. I'll take that back. And now the SEC is like, you know what? Like, actually, no, we don't want that anymore. If the auto bids go away and we're sitting here at the end of this season with competitive Big 12 teams not getting in the discussion. You know what I mean, Bill? Like, I am going to be so frustrated like this. And you could hear the questions to Sankey. People are so outraged by the auto bids. I'm telling you, you're wrong. Brett Yormark, you're wrong. All the media people who knee-jerk reacted to this, you're wrong. And here's the numbers on this. Just very quickly. And also the idea that like other sports just let in all the best teams is also wrong. Every sport divides teams into groups and says, well, we're going to let people in from this group. And there's more groups in the NBA and Major League Baseball and the NFL. The NFL has 8 groups. We're only talking about 4 groups in college football and then the group of 5 team, right? So to say, well, let's give at least 2 to other groups, you're not adding any more people. Here's my point. The NFL has 14 playoff spots. 8 of them are guaranteed, right? 8 of them are guaranteed to the 8 division winners. So 8 of the 14 are guaranteed within a group that's 57% of your playoff bids are not to the best teams. They're to a guaranteed subset. The NBA does 38% guaranteed to a subset. Major League Baseball does 50% guaranteed to a subset. If you only have 5 auto bids out of 16 in college football, you're only guaranteeing 31% of your playoff spots to a subset. But if you have 13 of 16, now you're guaranteeing 81% to a subset, right? So that's what people are pushing back against. The reality is, if you think that's too many auto bids, I understand why you're saying that, but 5's too few.
Yeah.
5's too few. Maybe 4, 4, 2, 2, 1, which is 13, is too many. But you can't do 3, 3, 2, 2, 1 because the SEC and Big Ten wouldn't go for it. So you probably can't actually get to that 50 or 60% number, right? You know what I'm saying? That would compare to Major League Baseball or the NFL. So then I would say, then go more towards auto bids. Don't go towards less. Because when Lane Kiffin says, let's just have the 16 best teams, that's not how any sport works. That's not how any sport works. You divide them up into little groups and you kind of say, like, do this thing in your group and then you'll get in. And I know they say, well, that's what we're doing in college football, but you're not doing it enough if it's only 5 out of 16. I think 5 auto bids and 11 at large is 75% down of the way to a break-off league. Why are the Big 12 and the ACC even here? The Big 10 and the SEC just got 13 out of the 16 spots. Why do we even need them? And the Big 12 and the ACC will look back and say, I can't believe we didn't take the auto bids when we had the chance. I think 5+11 is accelerating the destruction of college football as we know it, while everybody freaking fiddles about the idea of how dare the SEC and the Big 10 want their guaranteed 4. It's not about the 4, man. It's about the 2. And people are so wrong on it.
It was interesting. Like Brent Yormark, I think, was citing fairness as the reason for why he wanted the 5 versus 11. A part of me does wonder if in his mind, like he sort of believes that the Petiti model, the 4-4-2-2 model, is what will actually win the day. So in the meantime, he's just going to put himself in the camp that perceptually looks a little better for himself right now. I hope it doesn't backfire on him in the end in the next, because 5-11 is better for the Big 10, is it not? Like, why? The only reason Tony Petiti wants the 4-4 whatever auto bid thing is so he can do his championship weekend extravaganza and get more television revenue or television inventory, and he needs something for those teams to play themselves into that is a little more structurally coherent than a 5-11 would be. But like, if it ends up being a 5-11 and all it is which of the SEC and the Big 10 is going to get 7 teams that year, like I think the Big 10 is very comfortable living in that world, and the Big 12 and the ACC, as you said, will find themselves more often than not, I think, with one team each in the field and wondering why they ever signed up for it in the first place.
I do think the fact that the Big 10 plays 9 conference games and the SEC plays 8, and this is a factor that Sankey has talked about, the Big 10 is worried about this. It's just math involved here, and I have the math. I mean, everybody knows the math, but the SEC is refusing to go to auto. They want auto bids if they go to 9 regular season games, because what you're doing is guaranteeing more of your middle of the pack teams that are going to be in the playoff discussion. You're adding losses to them. Right. You're adding losses to them, guaranteed, if you go to 9 conference games. And if it's auto bids and it's just like, well, you take your 4 however you want, we'll put in our 4 however you want. But when everybody, right, it's like, hey, we're looking at these 11 at-large teams holistically when their schedules aren't equal. This is why Tony Petiti, I just want to be. You watch Veep? Did you watch Veep, the TV show? You watch Veep, the TV show? No. Oh my God, it's so good. Tony Petiti is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who is the vice president, and then I want to be Tony Petiti's body man, and I want to have a knapsack with hand lotion for Tony Petiti, his favorite snacks, and I want to whisper in his ear and tell him what to say. And if you let me do that, Tony, we will win the day. But what's not going to win the day is hiding at a cocktail party that nobody knows exists. Okay. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to bring in Steven Godfrey to get some Southern vibe on this. Bill's going to take a little break. Bill's going to join us at the end to talk about mob bosses. And that's where we are. We're at swords, warhammers, and mob bosses. This is how much we think this stuff matters. My God, I'm angry. We'll be back after this on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises. Back on Kings of the North with your friend and mine, Steven Godfrey. He lives on an island, and he is a phantom. Godfrey, good to see you, man.
How are you? Can you hear me okay? Everything good?
You heard me. Did you hear me shouting before?
Yeah, I did. You okay?
No. Before we get into what we're going to talk about here, can you just tell the people about what you're working on now? You have a new show. It's called Phantom Island, and you talk about college football, but also many, many other things.
Yeah, it's not just college football, and especially not in the month of, I was about to say May, but now early June, because there'd just be this one thing that we're going to talk about that's essentially dominating. No, we just recorded an episode on everything from why expansion franchises aren't frequent anymore in America and pro leagues to we did one on the UFL and why that's falling apart again. We did one on the WNBA draft. And so we have that. And then we have all the other shows that you might be more familiar with me doing, like the Single Wing. There's a show called Numbers and Words, which is kind of a nod to my old podcasting days where I bring in a quantitative and sort of work off of them in college football. So all that's around. PhantomIsland.show. Got those got a .show URL now because .coms are too ubiquitous. So
show.
.show. I didn't know you could do a .show either. My partner Ryan Naney does it. So yeah, .show.
That sounds right. Naney would find that.
But a ton of college football will be. I mean, we keep a steady drip, and then as we get into, I looked up media days for some reason this morning just to see when the start was. What are we doing? Why must we be so early? Too early.
8th and 9th, I think, for the Big 12. Yeah.
Hate it.
End your summer. You better get to the beach quick, brother. All right, let's talk about, good luck with that show. I've listened to a couple episodes. Fantastic at all. Why is the SEC so public about this stuff? And I don't know if people know this about your background, but there was a time where you worked in professional wrestling. So you have a PR handle on this. I want to get to, is it good for the SEC or not, which people in our chat have been bringing up. But first, why do you think the SEC does it this way, where they go to the beach and do a TV show for 3 or 4 days in May to get their views out about the sport?
Because they are trying to mimic the NFL calendar and create a 24/7, 365 media, like a total saturation of the market. Okay. So the NFL is exquisite at this. They are definitely better than anything in the world, including FIFA, at creating a nearly perfect year-round calendar. The SEC would like to emulate that as best it can. And also, you have to realize this goes way back in history to most of the SEC's leading television markets didn't have, they weren't dominated by professional sports. So if you're in Chicago right now, Cubs are in season, I can go across the landscape, explain this to you, but this is a way to basically own the market in all of the Birminghams and Knoxvilles and New Orleans of the world. And so they've always done it like this, essentially, since the modern era dawned. And whenever I say modern era, I always talk about 92. That's when you get conference championship games, divisions. That's when you build towards that's really when the Bowl Alliance shifts into the BCS a couple years later. And so as long as I've worked in the, I'm not really in college sports media on a day-to-day basis anymore. But when I came in around 2000, it was always a means to keep people talking about the Southeastern Conference. Mm-hmm. Also down here right now is the peak of college baseball season. So it's just really a way for them to own the calendar. They're getting their teeth kicked in, by the way. So if you can appreciate that.
Oh yeah. And baseball. Yeah. They lost the ACC
badly.
Whooping their butts in
stuff. And it's funny to bridge this into a conversation where I think you want to go. I've had this argument with a lot of people in the South. I don't really give a rip about college baseball, just mainly because of a style of play, and also I just it's not a time of year where I want to be invested in these colleges, but it's not for me, and I acknowledge that. But it's become so popular and so dominant, and it is a fairly decent jewel in sort of the SEC the contract crown with ESPN. Like they are starting to push it. But the absence of the Big Ten and the absence of other parts of the country is what's holding the sport back. You can see where I'm going with this as we bridge back into football. I looked at the bracket this morning. There was one Big Ten team that's not on the West Coast in the entire tournament, and 0 of the original Big Ten was in the tournament. This is a problem. SEC fans are going to say, "Oh, it's a problem for the Big Ten." No, it's a problem for the sport.
Which also, and you're leading us into football, which is like, hey, SEC, if you ever think you want to go off and do your own thing, here's a sport that is Southern centric.
That and the Big Ten.
And we've been teasing people we're working on a little thing. So I just working on this other little thing that we're working on. I have the numbers on this.
Yeah.
77 NCAA baseball champions in history, 11 from the North. And only 3 in the last 30 years, all by Oregon State. But do you know how many men's college hockey champions there have been from the South?
I don't know, but I'm just going to say go UA Huntsville.
0 for 77. And nobody talks about that. Where's the conversation about that, Steven? The South sucks
pretty easy there.
at college hockey.
Yeah, there's a slight difference there. I think you
but
would
all I'm saying is,
acknowledge.
but there's also a difference between college baseball in the South and college baseball in the North, right? That's all I'm saying.
Well, one is a sport
Geography
that
and
one
climate
is a sport that was once called America's pastime, and one is a sport that we imported from Canada that can't only be played in certain controlled
It's about
environments.
weather.
I love
You can
hockey,
build-
but
You can
it's
build
not
an
it's
ice
not a
rink in
nationalized sport.
Georgia. No, but
Doug,
all
you
I'm
really
saying is
you really don't
don't
want to get in the
come on
topic of
here.
hockey because the entire NHL is migrating south, and the next two teams are probably going to be in Atlanta and Houston. So
Okay, well then where's your college hockey? So then college hockey in the South could matter if they wanted it to. So it's not it's geographic and climate based, but it's also cultural. But here's the thing. You can't come on, and I know you weren't really saying this, but you can't be like, well, how come the North isn't better at baseball without saying how come the South isn't better at hockey? The whole point
That's not
is
what I'm saying. Then what I'm saying is that the sport of baseball at the collegiate level will never become the national brand that the South wants it to be unless they include the entire country.
But it's never going to happen. But also,
it definitely could happen. There's only 3 or 4 things. There's some scheduling changes you'd have to make.
What's the point? But why would the North bother? They get snowed out.
Money, revenue, money. It's not that hard. It's money.
They're good at wrestling. They're good at lacrosse. They're good at hockey. They don't need to be good at baseball and softball. It's fine. Let the South have it. But it's wonderful why we have a sport like football where we can all come together and hate each other.
Wouldn't you agree that reductive attitude is exactly what you accuse the South of doing all the time?
What's the reductive attitude? No, reductive attitude.
Oh, we don't need baseball in the Big Ten.
But why? But how is that different than we don't need hockey in the SEC? Honestly,
they would take hockey in a hot second. Believe me, they're just now starting volleyball. Like there are certain sports that are. I guess the argument is baseball a national sport or is it regionalized the way you would look at something like field hockey, ice hockey, beach volleyball, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Title IX and everything that's going on with House, you can only carry so many sports at a time. But baseball is still ubiquitous across the country. You just have to. Yes, I do think the North has to get better at it, but I also think calling. This is where I disagree with the conceit of like Oregon State is not the same North as Northeast Ohio, and there's a reason why Oregon State and Oregon are strong in baseball, and places where snow is coming in February might not be. But the ubiquity and popularity of baseball in the North is never argued. There are more minor league teams in the Northeast than there are in any other part of the country.
But I don't think there's much college baseball culture in the North, and I don't see that as a problem.
Ask yourself why.
Because it snows, and they have hockey and wrestling and lacrosse.
I don't think snow is necessarily what's keeping.
But you can't.
North.
But you can't. And just because baseball was popular in the 50s, I don't think that has any effect on whether baseball should matter to the Big Ten.
Doug,
right
where
now.
Where are the most popular baseball teams in America located? New York, Boston,
in
Chicago.
New York. Yeah, but I don't think. I think to have that. Now we're doing a college baseball show.
Which is not what I meant to do.
No. But the idea that the North should do something there, but the South can ignore something. You just said the NHL is moving to the South, but then what? Then where's the college hockey in the South? Anyway, I don't want to talk about this anymore.
Some of that is coming on in the South. It'll be a while before the Southeastern Conference actually builds into it, but. I mean, I can show you a number. Yeah, like one of my kids plays hockey in Nashville. Like hockey is coming on. It's just going to be it's going to be slower as an adoption rate, mainly just because. Whereas like baseball is essentially, I mean, the Hall of Fame is in Cooperstown, New York. It's a more ubiquitous part of the American experience. And yes, the North does need to do better, but the NCAA could actually help them.
Why? But when you say yes, the North needs to do better. Why? For who? The North needs to do better at college baseball. Why?
This is interesting. Aren't you in favor of the Big Ten being better and like there being a greater balance?
The Big Ten
just in football.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the Big Ten already offers more sports than the SEC. I mean, the SEC is much more focused on football first and then everything else.
And the Big Ten was trying to be like maybe the revenue sports might be a little bit more important for the health and well-being of these universities and conferences?
Yeah. So then why are you
going to make a lot more television revenue off of? Because you're going to make a lot more television revenue off of baseball, which holds a television contract with ESPN and is actually something that receives promotion and marketing than you are in.
Now we're doing Phantom Islands. This is college.
No, I'm telling you, this is going to help the Big Ten, and you're not listening.
No. I know I don't think that's going to help. I think that is so far down the list of things that help the Big Ten. Did the SEC have a good week? They had a chatty week. Brett McMurphy had a tweet that said from a source, this is like the NFL saying it's the best football league or the NBA saying it's the best baseball league. Why even do this? What's the purpose? Which actually, like, again, is like the kind of highfalutin, like the gap is actually closing. And to compare the SEC to the NFL, that like everybody else is inferior, right, is also the kind of thing that makes me mad. And then Dan Wolken from USA Today retweeted that and said, have heard similar stuff. The entire week was not good for the league's image. Came off very whiny. The Sankey doth protest too much. So Bill and I were talking about the idea that the SEC owned the public discussion about college football for a week while the Big Ten was silent. But did they own it in a good way? Or did somehow the SEC hurt itself by handing out a packet to a bunch of media members about how difficult its schedule is?
I love this.
The packet. You love the packet.
Oh, God. Yeah.
I'd love for the Big Ten to send us a packet.
No, I want to know whose idea this was. I want to know why.
Packet idea?
Oh, God, I love it so much.
You're mocking them. You're mocking their
God,
packet.
Yeah, of course.
But Sankey likes charts. He's a chart and packet commissioner, man. I don't know what to tell you.
He's a chart. He's a pack full of something, commissioner. Sankey is revered and unquestioned, certainly in my part of the country, but I also think, honestly, at the national level, I don't think Greg Sankey is ever challenged on his positions. I think you're starting to see that a little bit, but since he took over, I've said this 1,000 times. He's no longer with us. Purdue graduate. Mike Slive was a gangster. He was a proper gangster, and he built the modern SEC, and he really built the modern identity of college football. Greg Sankey has received almost 2 times the amount of veneration and has, in my opinion, nothing comparable to show for it. He was born on third, thinking he hit a triple. And I think he's desperate right now to... We talked about this on Who Killed College Football. I kind of framed it around some of Sankey's aspiration and hubris. We used Nick Saban, but I kind of think Sankey now is the main, is sort of the agent of change, or wants to be. I think Sankey is trying to leave a signature on the sport via the SEC. So and this infuriates like you and your listeners. He interchanges the concept of college football and Southeastern Conference football without any designation. So sometimes he'll talk about the sport when in actuality, all he represents is one conference. And yet every decision or everything he advocates for usually only benefits the SEC. There is a sort of temporary symbiotic relationship between the two power leagues. Right now, I think it's just, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I don't think that there's necessarily a long-term truce or sort of alliance between the Big Ten and the SEC, but for obvious reasons, financially, et cetera, television rights, it makes sense for them to operate in tandem. Was it a good week? It was hilarious for me. Just watching it and laughing. I think we'd have to pick that apart, and understanding all this is semantic. Some of the arguments they've made about playoff formatting, I think it's almost foolish for them and us to get into this. We are looking at one set of data. One.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, Doug, I kind of just want to go back in time and, like, I can't believe I'm saying this, just so everyone would shut up. I wish so badly now, I can't believe I'm saying this, that it wasn't SMU and it was Alabama or whatever. Just because if it was, honestly, and this is the same Alabama team that could not stop a Michigan team that essentially didn't play a quarterback, like didn't have a quarterback.
Yeah, Bama
so this is not a good Bama, not a good Bama team, right? Not a good Bama team. What
you'd rather Bama gets in and gets stomped?
Goes to, like, if everything else is equal in my mind's eye, that would just be SMU going to Penn State. So just slot Bama going into Penn State. I think they get beat up in a very similar fashion, kind of honestly similar to that bowl game against Michigan. Let that happen and let's move on, because I think some of the histrionics that we're seeing now in the offseason from the SEC delivering, cooked stat packets and nonsense would not have occurred at all. This was one freaking year's worth of data, guys. 1 year.
And I think you've expressed your opinion on this, and it's a very interesting one about like the future of the sport, and you're going to reference Premier League soccer.
Yeah.
How far, when the SEC, even within last week, is like, well, like they always are willing to float the thing of like, I don't know, maybe we'll just go do our own thing. are they just saber rattling and it's all public negotiations and trial balloons to eventually get their way? Or how far do you think the SEC in the end would ever push things to the point of it's our way or the highway? And if you don't want to do how we want to do it, we're going to take our ball and go home. And that means even not playing with the Big Ten. So I don't want to get into a 50-minute conversation about Super League, right? Because that's something else. But when the SEC threatens, is it hollow, or do you think there could be anything to it?
It wouldn't work.
Okay.
There's no way to do it. You can't have a hero without a villain, which I hate to tell you because it works in your direction too. You can't have the North without the South. Then it's just all one land.
Oh, the number one unifying thing of this show is hating the South.
Right.
Like, we're trying to create a Northern community and a Northern culture and talk about wearing hoodies and grilling out in November. It's mostly just telling the South to cram it. So yeah, heroes and villains, brother.
But the problem for both parties is you have to have each other. So I know you don't want me to talk about Super League. That's the only inevitable conclusion because these entities right now can't exist without one another. But they can and want to now exist. And I'm not exactly sure how some of the finer details will work. They want to pull away from the rest of the sport. What all we're really doing right now this spring is having a very ham-fisted discussion in public. I haven't seen the commissioners do this much dirty laundry in public in a while. Well, that's not true. It was, oh God, we're going to pay players. It's going to ruin the fabric of sports. That was the last time. This is how much are we going to tolerate these other entities? That's it. That's all we're talking about. And these other entities are squirming and frantically trying to justify their existence. So I'm talking about the ACC, whatever that might be in 5 years, we don't know. The Big 12, which weirdly looks more of a solidified brand, and then sort of the chaff is how they view it. And so my stance has always been on a personal level that you are sacrificing a tremendous amount of the sport's identity by moving on and treating it that way. But that day is past. This is happening. This is all going to happen. So if you're listening to this and if you're a Kansas State, Iowa State, West Virginia, whatever your fans are in your territory, like
Pitt, Syracuse, yeah,
you're done. They're going to find they are moving beyond you. They are going to cast you out. So you could have an exceptional 12-win, 11-win season at Pitt, and in whatever format they land on, they're going to squeeze you out of this thing. I'm telling you now, so they can put a 9-win Illinois or Alabama team in there. They're going to do it. This is going to happen, and it's over. You lost because you never got to play the game. So all we're really doing this spring is figuring out how much the Big Two are going to tolerate of these lesser people, and the rest of the sport and all of the national media don't seem to give a rip.
And that's why I'm so mad that the Big 12 didn't just grab onto 2 auto bids. That Brett Yormark's like, yeah, 5 and 11, let's do that. Do you think that?
Yeah, but Landis said in the last segment that he has to protect one of the few pieces of revenue he has, and I also believe it's a little bit of brinksmanship where it's like, if you grant them an inch now, I mean, they can take it whether they want to or not because all they have to do is Sankey has to call Petiti. Right. And Sankey can call Petiti and say we're done anyway. We're just going to hold a tournament against the two leagues. That's it. We're done. They can do that. That is way more realistic than people realize.
But do you think that's? I mean, you're talking about. We're going to bring Bill back in here for a second.
They'll call Notre Dame too, by the way.
That's fine. Like that's good. That will succeed. That will be good for the sport, or they will come to regret it.
Ooh, I don't know if they'll come to regret it for a while. I think it's going to damage. I personally think it damages the ubiquity of the sport, the coverage area of the sport. I think it just absolutely. We're just in a weird spot right now. They want to double the size of the basketball tournament. No one really knows why. No one has provided a good explanation for expanding the field of 68 again, and we're doing it. The only answer is money, by the way. It's because they kind of got. The NCAA got short shrift on the last TV deal, at least by their perspective, and now they have a new commissioner, and this is one of the few wins he could eke out as the NCAA is starting to essentially implode in the NIL era. the NCAA, for those of you, this is a little piece of education. The NCAA does not control college football's postseason. It does not technically control the college football season. It's just left to these confederacies of leagues. And because they all struck independent media deals, essentially there's no cooperation, and television runs the sport now. They're just going to move towards whatever makes the most sense from a profit perspective. So, man, I've evolved professionally from being like, look, Boise matters. Boise should be in this. And like the American Athletic Conference has some really, like, Cincinnati and Houston are great teams. And now it's just like, so it's insane to me, if I was a Kansas State fan, how pointless it would all feel. If I was a Pitt fan, if I was a Virginia Tech fan, how pointless this all feels. That's where I go back to. Like, is this good for Illinois? We talk a lot about Illinois just because, you know, Brett has had a little bit of an upswing there. But you could say, is this good for Michigan State? Absolutely. Who's still sort of an on paper theory, you know, I like Smith a lot, and I think he'll do good there, but we don't know yet. Is this good for South Carolina? Yeah. Does it come at the direct expense and seals the fate of about 40 other programs? Yes. And I guess at this point we're okay with that. But you're like your footprint, Doug, like you are killing some of your babies here to advance the cause of Iowa.
I'm taking my sword to Destin. I'm not killing anybody up here.
But to advance the cause of Iowa, you have to give up Iowa State, and you have to give up Boise, and you have to give up these other schools.
Let's bring Bill back in here for this, because we want to have the half a gangster conversation. But one of the things here is the idea that the SEC and Big Ten are friends here. And I sort of question is, like, why didn't the Big Ten maybe become friends with the Big 12 and the ACC to lead the resistance against the SEC?
Why?
Which would maybe, because like you care about, because the SEC is going to run you over anyway. And all they do down there is talk about how their schedule strength is so much better than Indiana's, and they're your friends, they're your partners on one hand, but they're not your friends. And why didn't the Big Ten, which once upon a time, and I know people make fun of the alliance and then they destroyed the Pac-12 right after, but what if there was a world where they were setting themselves up for that, right? And if it's not just like every nickel, the pursuit of every single nickel, let's try to save college football and hold off the SEC, ESPN conglomerate monopoly that's trying to destroy this thing. I think there would have been an avenue there. And instead they threw it with the SEC.
You can't save college football without the SEC, and you can't save college football without the Big Ten. But there's a foreseeable path forward. These two entities are way too similar for either to declare war on the other, and also it's a complete waste of time, resources, and posturing to include these sub-tiered conferences now, because they're so much weaker. It doesn't matter. You couldn't pull apart and do a postseason tournament between the Big 12, the ACC, and the Big 10. You'd be back in the pre-Bowl Alliance days. It would be a disaster. The only thing that you could do that would pass the muster of public credibility is to combine the Big Two into a postseason tournament and call Notre Dame, and you're done. You can get away with that. Also, because the Big Ten was craven enough to pick apart the Pac-12.
They are. I know. Well,
they have those West Coast schools now. They can claim it's a national tournament.
But they could have let the Pac-12 live and then claim that in another way. I just think they could have tried to make more money this way. Sport.
No one's here to stand up for the sport. No one is coming to save the sport.
Which is the problem of the sport. Which is the only major sport that exists that they all hate each other.
If the United States was run by 50 governors, this is what would happen.
So, Bill, I was going to ask, are the SEC and the Big Ten actually friends?
No.
But they're partners. Bill, what are they? They're partners, but they're not friends. So how do you view this?
I thought they were friends. Like that was part of what was illuminating, I guess, last week with some of the playoff talk in particular, was that I guess the Big Ten and the SEC aren't quite on the same terms as I thought they were when trying to decide what this should look like. But a part of me does wonder how much of that boils down to posturing, and maybe they actually are, because Greg Sankey has to go to the podium and cover his own backside first and foremost, and
Yeah.
say the things he needs to say for the people in his conference to be happy. Words and actions are different. So, if I had to put them in a category, I would say that they're probably more friendly than not, because I think both of them have the understanding of what Godfrey just said, is like they have to go through this together. They can't do it separately, because then neither one will end up in a great place. But they need to, I guess, like kind of get back together and hatch out exactly what that needs to look like, because when I thought going into last week that they were on the same terms, and I guess they're not now.
The scheduling thing is getting a little stupid in my opinion, but it's also a way for them. I think they're also using it a little bit as a crux, and it's a good stall tactic while other things like House resolve to sit there and debate the regular season thing. And I could argue either side.
You talk about the 8 or 9 conference games.
It's a fairly stupid argument. Either way,
I think it's meaningful if you're in a 5-11 world. I understand why the Big Ten is
potentially, but I think as long as you have a selection committee format, one of the things that we've already seen is an uptick in solid 1-on-1s being signed by non-9-team conferences, because resume bolstering is now something that isn't encouraged; it's mandatory. So you look at, I just pulled one up at random. So LSU right now they've locked in as many as they could. Like their 25-26 schedule, or 25 schedule was already done, and they're about to start a 1-on-1 with Clemson. But like in 29, they just filled this up. They're going to have Arizona State and SMU. You're going to see those 8-team teams, and they already have like contracts with Utah coming up, and there's a return date with Arizona State and SMU. You're going to see those teams in the South that everyone's mad about bump up to 10 quality because of the resume. Also, keep in mind, you're mad at 16 teams. I think 8 or 7 of whom keep an existing extra game because of the ACC. So that's Florida State. That's Clemson, South Carolina. That's Louisville, Kentucky, on and on. There's like a whole litany of those in the South.
But it's also just math. I mean, it's just math. When you're adding, when you play an extra conference game against each other, you're throwing in a 16-team league, you're throwing 8 more losses on resumes in there. And you're throwing an extra loss guaranteed. So that's the thing of why they don't. It's just math. It's just math. Because you think it's not like all those 8 extra losses. Because if you're doing it, they're going to play 8 extra games.
Well, they'll dump
winners and 8 losers.
They'll dump out, like it'll kill the ACC. I think they won't advance past what they have now. And also, like,
but I think
the Big Ten is larger too, so they can distribute their extra losses in a way that makes better resume sense for them. Like I said, I can argue this both ways, and I think it's a semantic debate.
I don't think it's a semantic debate at all. I think it's a very specific math debate that if you're going to have 11 at large, that the Big Ten does not want to do that in a world where the SEC is not playing 9 conference games, because the math is going to help the SEC and hurt the Big Ten when you get down to those.
What's the math?
The math is that Big Ten teams, you guarantee extra losses in your conference by playing an extra conference game. And when that loss lands on the 4th or 5th.
Are you giving a bid to a team for its losses or its wins? We still don't know that. This is what it's been 1 year. Everybody needs to chill out.
No.
We don't know yet.
But clearly, and also
we need 6.
But why don't they want to do it? But the SEC says the only reason the SEC says they'll go to 9 conference games if there's auto bids. So they understand the math. They don't want to get caught in this math.
I don't think it's the math. It's the math a little bit, because they're overreacting to the 1 year aberration of they thought Alabama should have been in instead of SMU. Which is why I said at the top of the segment, like, God, I just wish I could go back in time and fix it so everyone would shut up. Because it's so stupid to talk about. Because it is overreaction on one single data point. Because the ACC had a first-year team over-index and go all the way to the conference championship game, because Florida State turned out to be like a freaking Ponzi scheme of it's hilarious to me how we're banking so much on one thing.
But the bottom line
is, everyone's mad at Arizona State getting a bid in the 2nd round or whatever stupid shit is. Like,
this is one of those, again, where we're talking about, are they friends or not? The SEC doesn't want to play the same number of games as the Big Ten. And I think it's not semantics. I think the Big Ten
want to control. They want to control the style of games, but also they want to control. They want more control independently of the games they schedule. I think, and again, like I said, if you want me to, I could argue one, I could argue the other. That's why I think it's, and if I feel capable enough to do that, that's why I feel it's semantic. I also feel like
I don't think there's any argument. But I think 9 conference games, it's just math. I don't want to get bogged in it. Let's do one last thing here.
It's also going to kill the other leagues. It's going to kill the Big 12 and the ACC if they do that.
But then the ACC and the Big 12 can like make a scheduling agreement and play awesome stuff against each other and
do
figure
what?
Some
Play
stuff
each other in the Liberty Bowl?
No,
like,
play each other in September. Play each other in September in the preseason.
The end is nigh, and so you can't argue the evilness of the Big 10 if you're the SEC or the SEC if you're the Big 10. You are acting the same. You are doing the same thing, and right now you are regardless of look past conference schedules for a second. You're the same thing.
No, but we understand that. We look past conferences all the time. We don't think conferences matter here. It's a geographic sport.
Well, you think the SEC matters.
I think the South matters. So
yeah. Okay.
The thing here
is that Georgia Tech goes to the Big 10. It's gonna be tough.
I know. We're going to pretend they don't exist, just like USC and UCLA. So the thing that happens is that they are in agreement on a lot of this stuff, but then there are these things along the way, taking pot shots at Indiana making the playoff, not wanting to play the same number of conference games as the Big 10 does, where it shows like you're not actually friends. You're partners. You agree in making money. You agree in controlling the sport.
No, they're going to try and kill each other eventually.
But how is the Big 10 trying to kill the SEC right now? That's the thing. I think the SEC, because Sankey's down there for 4 days taking pot shots at the Big 10 while Petitti's hiding with a martini in Southern California saying nothing, which leads us to this.
Y'all need to get over your humble Midwestern sensibilities and start throwing some darts.
Throwing darts, swinging swords. This is the question.
I'm talking about your leadership, not your media.
Well, we'll become the leadership if we have to. Okay. Here's the question.
All right, I like it. Go, Doug. Run the league.
Half a gangster. Is this strategy by the Big 10?
We
were talking about this is my mob boss analogy. You can be the front-facing mob boss in the Italian restaurant who everybody knows that you run your crew, but you're at risk of somebody coming in the restaurant and shooting you.
So the only thing left,
you can be in your condo and just make money and be behind the scenes and be protected and succeed in another way. But they only make movies about the mob bosses who sit in the Italian restaurant and put it on the line.
Yeah,
and this is an entertainment
mob
business.
Bosses. Yes, the most effective mob bosses in America are corporate executives who you don't know the name of, who win every time.
Is that Tony Petitti? And Greg Sankey is out there, and Tony Petitti is like, man, I love my Southern California cocktail party. I don't have to say anything. He's doing all my dirty work. Is it a great strategy by the Big 10 to be silent, even if they're frustrated?
If that is the strategy, Doug, it's a long-term strategy, an extremely long play, which, by the way, doesn't look terrible considering what the Big 10 very tactfully turned around after they shook the hands of the Pac-12 and ripped their spine clean out of their body. Okay, Mortal Kombat is right off the hood. Okay,
yes,
and it worked perfectly. That is essentially the best and most effective blueprint moving forward for what's going to happen to the future of the sport. Because we are, again, I think we call it the summer of semantics. We're gonna land on something where the Power 2 conferences control the postseason, and there's going to be an ever dwindling representation of anyone else. That's where we're headed. The next inevitable step as we get around 2034 is television renewal time. The best blueprint is that one of these leagues does to the other what the Big 10 did by sort of lifting off the healthy top half of the Pac-12. So if I'm Petitti, I think that your program and the entire SEC branding model are the same. They're built on regional identity. If you can eschew that, which is what successfully happened in the West Coast. Now you got USC playing a road game in Illinois in conference play, right? Great. Okay. Sure. We're going to do that. Okay. Wisconsin at UCLA. Great. We're going to do that in women's basketball. Makes no freaking sense, but that's what we're doing. The next move would be for one of these leagues to basically do evolve. We've called it a super league before, but we start looking at the 20 to 24 model. I'm talking about not years, team, like team volume, and you clip off one for the other. The other thing I'll leave you with is this. The last thing that hasn't happened that seems obvious is that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Oregon, and maybe USC, if they ever get functional, are going to look around and say, we have more in common with Alabama, Florida, Georgia, LSU than we do with our brethren. This is not far-fetched. This was the sales pitch that Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State gave to USC, Oregon, Washington, and UCLA. Okay? That pitch can go south or it could go north. And I think by 2040 that you have one solidified entity The interesting thing, Doug, is who's running that entity? Like, is it the bones of the old Big Ten or is it the bones of the old SEC? And right now, as much as I like to talk in the public space, just like you, I tend to like the long view that the Big Ten has adopted. They didn't need to say a damn thing this week. So the dumbest thing you can do is speak when you don't need to. But what did they lose this week by not speaking?
They are. I mean, I guess that's the question. Like, if the public perception, and then the question is, what did the SEC gain by doing any of it?
I think they may have. This is the first time
their
I can
ideas
remember.
Out.
Yeah, but this is the first time I can remember. I can remember public moments with the SEC. I've been down here. I've covered it for a long time. I'm from here. This is the first week where I think even the most adamant SEC hardcores were like, man, you can see the strain. You can see the effort they're putting. Like, you can see they're not operating from a power position.
But you started by saying they're like the NFL. They're doing 365. Like, they're adapting to the modern PR world.
But Doug, this isn't the first year that Destin meeting. No, I think they may have said too much and a little bit of the wrong. And like, Destin is always at an event.
Yeah.
But I think this year, Sankey especially looked a little, or kind of came off as a little like angry and harried. Whereas normally, like, they always sort of operate from a position of authority and influence. I think this is also coupled by the fact that you had, like, we haven't talked about this segment. The other thing that happened in Destin was like a pretty significant amount of like snipping back and forth as usual about NIL from coaches who used to be able to control this sport, like Kirby and like Lane. Lane took a really pretty big swing at Kirby after Kirby got done doing his, like, Kirby can't control the world of NIL the way he could control the world of pre-NIL. So he's going to get out there and use Destin as a soapbox. That's going on. The SEC right now looks like a league that's lost 7 national titles in a row instead of 2.
So, Bill, is the final conclusion then that the Big Ten's winning here? They're the mob boss behind the scenes, letting all that stuff happen, and they're protected and counting their money. And when we started off, saying, why are they so silent?
No, maybe. But part of me wonders if there's any value for the Big Ten, to use a professional wrestling analogy, since we have Steven on, like the refs out of the ring and your opponent staggering a little bit, hit them with a chair and get away with it, kind of thing.
Yeah,
I do think. I don't know that the SEC came off looking strong in any of this. They were just sort of present, and the Big Ten wasn't. Yeah. And that feels like a bit of a lost opportunity for the Big Ten to maybe even join in on the people who are making fun of the SEC, right? Like, it doesn't.
I don't think that's ever going to be their MO. I
don't think it will be either,
because you're talking about a heel, and I think the Big Ten. As usual, because we've joked about this off air. They're the library conference. They view themselves as the babyface, the hero, and so it's very interesting. I like the way that you frame that up, because if you view Sankey as sort of the ultimate evil of the sport right now, and he's floundering even a little bit, like, you just kind of take a step back and then you go in for the kill. And I think right now, the kill is Penn State looks pretty damn complete going into the fall. The kill is, Ohio State's not going to drop off that much. The kill is Michigan just bought a quarterback out from under LSU. It's like, this is the long game, people.
And then my question is, could maybe the Big Ten commissioner stand up in front of somebody for 10 minutes in May and remind people of that? That's all.
He won't do it. I think you're looking for, I think you want to beat the SEC acting like the SEC, Doug. And I don't think they're ever going to do that.
But one of the ways that the Big Ten, we're working on our project, won the last 2 national titles is by started acting more like the SEC, and maybe
on the field. The field.
So, okay.
Yeah, just
can't we back like so?
What do you want him to do? Do you want him to get like a Marriott, like at some like lake resort off like one of the Great Lakes, and like, because it's Destin's like Gulf Coast, it's very southeastern. I'm trying to think of like the northeastern comp or something.
We'll go to
Lake Michigan.
Go to that
Lake Michigan resort
where you can't drive a car. Everybody rides their bikes around.
All right,
Saugatuck. No, Saugatuck.
And then what?
And then have a meeting where you remind people that Ole Miss didn't make the playoff because they lost to 1-7 Kentucky, and that if they want to complain about Indiana,
they didn't make the playoff. Indiana did. Who cares?
Because I guess the question is, do you believe you are influencing public discourse in any meaningful way that's going to actually change things? Or are you just
the biggest way to influence public discourse is to enter into a rights deal with the network that provides the most coverage.
Yeah, well, that would be a good idea.
Whoops.
They got that 3:30 schedule on CBS though. Nevada, Penn State. Just see that. All right.
That was more
yelling. That's more yelling at each other than usual. We're still good, right?
Well, you get mad, but when I come on here and agree with you too much,
I know it's good. Okay,
you get mad. You're like, we're gonna bring the redneck on, and then when I agree with you the whole segment, you're like, well, that's not gonna work.
Come on, I want to be on the island. Can I come on the island off all the Phantoms? Have me on.
Yes,
I'll talk. I know how to.
I want to know about this island where they don't drive cars.
Ping
in Michigan.
pong.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah, I know it sounds lovely. Let's go have a meeting there with Tony Petiti. He's Steven Godfrey. Find him on Phantom Island with Ryan Nanny. They do super interesting stuff. Landis and I will come back to take some KOTN questions and comments and wrap up this stuff here on Kings of the North. Thanks, Steven.
Thank you.
Doug Lesmerises to Bill Landis. Someone, I was fired up.
That was clarifying for me. I want the Big Ten to be. I want the Big Ten to be a heel, but they never will be. They'll never do it. And I think Godfrey's right that way.
But I guess the question is, if the SEC is being the heel, can't the Big Ten just be the hero instead of being a silent hero? Can't they come out and get fire up the crowd in their own way?
I don't think you can be the hero if you sort of have to like stoop to the level of the heel to accomplish it. No.
Here's the thing that bothers me the most about the Big Ten in the end is they are a heel in their actions. They treated the Pac-12 as a friend, and then they destroyed the Pac-12.
Mm-hmm.
They changed their TV deal in pursuit of money and have riled up the most important fan base in the Big Ten by continually putting their games at noon. They expanded into New York and Maryland and with New Jersey in a way that like no one really asked them to, and created a bunch of games that most Big Ten fan bases don't really care about in the pursuit of cable boxes. Like they are a heel in action constantly, but they're afraid to do it publicly.
Yes. They don't want to.
They want to keep up their image, and they think the way to keep it up is to be silent when they're already doing these other things. And I would be very frustrated by we're going to go to Division III if you pay players. I thought that was disingenuous and crazy. So back then when they were being disingenuous and crazy, Jim Delaney was willing to get out and say stuff. Mm-hmm. And now that they're actually just playing the game the way the SEC does, they're doing it in silence. And I find that if they were public about it and they would just get out and talk about winning ball games and being awesome, I would find that reassuring. And now I find this. They used to be public, but not honest. And now I think they're honest and not public. And I don't like either of them.
Yeah. But you have to have the right sort of vessel, I guess, to be public, right? Is Tony Petiti a credible heel or whatever? Like however you want to couch it. Like I don't know, because we never see him, and the only time we've seen him in the last year was when he was talking about libraries at Big Ten Media Day.
You know what's a vessel? The Big Ten Network. You created your own network that you could do wall-to-wall coverage from Ranchos Palos Verdes, and have Dave Revson interviewing everybody in the conference. And I know they have their
Isn't Ranchos Palos Verdes part of the problem too, though? Like,
yeah, it is part of the problem.
Do it in Chicago.
Mackinac Island is the island that I'm trying to think of. Mackinac Island. We'll go up there. Yeah. It's very Big Ten. You ride your bike. You have to take a ferry over. There's no cars there. And then we have a news conference with Tony Petiti. And everybody gathers and we talk about the good things the Big Ten's doing and can get their ideas out into the conversation. That's all I'm asking for. So, and I don't know. Maybe what I want this to be is like I don't want to be unrealistic either, because these are conversations that frustrate me. Is when people are against the auto bids. It's like, what do you mean you're against the auto bids? Texas and Oklahoma and Oregon and Washington and USC change conferences. That already happened. They earned the auto bid. They took all the teams. So then I don't love it when Godfrey comes on here. It's like, well, by 2040, there's only going to be 20 college football teams, and everything else is going to be a vast wasteland of memories. And like, I don't really want to have that conversation, but I don't want to be blind to it. Yeah. And we started this show under the idea that we think the sport's dividing North and South, and it probably is going to divide North and South. But when he says like, too bad Kansas State and Pitt, you're dead, I have a knot in my stomach.
Yeah.
And so what I would like to happen is for the Big Ten to have stood up for Pitt and Syracuse and Kansas State and Iowa State and try to form a firewall and hold that off as long as possible and say, the SEC, you need us. The SEC needs the Big Ten, because I think the three of us agreed, right?
Mm-hmm.
A Southern champ, right? It's like, hey, it's our Southern champ. And if Steven's making the point of like, well, what can you do? You can't have a championship without the SEC. It was, I don't think you can have an SEC championship without the rest of the sport either. So if the Big Ten would have tried to throw in with everybody else against the SEC and maybe hold off the inevitable for a little while longer, and then while you're doing that, maybe people come around to the idea that, like, what are we doing here? Like, there is room for 60 teams to do this or 80 teams to do that. So it doesn't have to be a top 30, right? Maybe you would have had time to come to that realization. And instead they threw in with the SEC, and it feels like we are accelerating toward a break-off that is primarily the best teams of those conferences. But then again, when he says Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and Oregon, and to figure out we have more in common with Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee than we do with the rest of the Big Ten, that gives me a knot in my stomach too. Because in some ways, I know what you mean. When it comes to football success and money-making potential, I know what you mean.
Right.
But when it comes to a lot of other things that the Big Ten claims to care about, I don't agree with that. I think they have much more in common with Purdue and Maryland and Rutgers and Washington and Minnesota than they do with Tennessee and LSU and Florida. So that also gives me a knot in my stomach.
You got a lot of knots in your stomach. I think that they probably care about those things that make them more kindred spirits with the Purdues of the world less than they used to, right? And more about the things that make them more like Alabama more than they used to. So I don't think you're wrong. It's just sort of which of those two sides of the Big Ten's personality are winning out at the moment, and it's certainly the football part of it and the money making part of it.
It's the ruthless part of it.
The ruthlessness,
which wraps up this conversation. The ruthless part of the personality has won.
Mm-hmm.
The ruthless part of the personality killed the library part of the personality. But they won't talk about it. And I think if they don't say anything, maybe people will believe that they still are the library personality.
Don't you think that Tony Petiti is still going to show up at Big Ten Media Days in Vegas in a month and talk about library still? Like,
I do.
Yeah.
I don't think if we ask him what is your response to the Big Ten to the SEC schedule strength argument where they're taking shots at Indiana, right? I don't think he's gonna respond in a very defamatory way toward the SEC when the SEC has no problem taking shots at the Big Ten. So I guess it's left to us. Do you want to go to Ranchos Palos Verdes next year? Is that the answer?
I think it has to be, or wherever they decide to put it in California. Yeah.
Here's who we care about on this show. We care about Northern college football fans. And I think I would just like it for them. I want them to enjoy their falls primarily, because I think it's okay to not care about college football that much in June. I think that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
There are many other things to do in life. But I want them to enjoy their falls primarily. And winning is part of that. And being on TV networks that you can watch the games when you want to is part of that. And having good announcers that you like is part of that. And playing opponents that you care about is part of that. And I mean, the Big Ten is giving up some of that stuff. I think the Big Ten is and the Big 12, like our Northern Big 12 teams and our 3 ACC teams. I think there's a lot of good still there. I think there's a lot of opportunity for our Northern fan bases to enjoy their fall Saturdays, which is still what this is about the most.
Mm-hmm.
But in some of these other areas, when you've lost some things, I'd like to try to replace it with some things, which is if Southern college football fans get to have a fun time and a discourse in May, I'd like our fans to have a fun time and a discourse in May. That's all.
Yeah. They can have it on
fun.
KOTN.
They can have it on
the
KOTN.
discourse now. Yeah.
You yelled too much.
Welcome to the discourse.
You see, I get emotional. It does.
Yeah.
I get emotional about it.
It's just tearing you apart. I can tell. Yeah.
Like I really am going to have a knot in my stomach for the rest of the day, thinking about the future of the sport. Why are we headed towards this? Is it inevitable? I'm in favor of progress, but progress that involves money at the expense of everything else. I don't know who's in favor of that.
Mm-hmm.
You like hedge fund managers and right?
Yeah.
I mean, like those
which will probably have a hand in accelerating college football to
like
its end.
why does it have to be this way? Why does it have to be that money is? I understand that money rules the day, but it's God, man. Sometimes it feels like the only thing. And if Purdue can't make you a nickel, then I guess we're done with Purdue. Like why does it have to be that way? I also don't want to be held back like just because you joined a conference with somebody before cars were invented, you have to be in the conference with them now. I also don't think it's that. I do think there's a middle ground on a lot of this stuff. So I don't know. I don't want our audience. I don't want the people who care about this as much as we do, because we care about it because they care about it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I love the stories of how much college football brings people together and is a part of your memories and who you are as a person and growing up and remaining attached to your hometown and all those kind of things that college football, I think, honestly does better than anything in society. I think you could argue that college football fandom attaches you to your roots as much as anything in society. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I would say sports generally, but maybe college football more specifically of all the sports probably does.
Yeah. So that matters so much, I think, to people. That's what this is really all about. And part of that is like having something fun to talk about with your friends in June, but to give that up because Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State think they have more in common with Alabama, Tennessee, and Florida, like that hurts my heart. That gives me a knot in my stomach. Because I understand.
Can I twist the knot a little more? Just because and this is maybe like a larger conversation. I had never heard the two sports compared to each other before, but I heard it on a podcast the other day. It was Stu Mandel and Bruce Feldman. Stu, in particular, I wouldn't say he voiced concern, but like he at least mentioned the idea of like college football at the moment is so lost and like getting up its own butt and not able to figure this thing out that it's potentially staring down a NASCAR lane, which is to say that NASCAR was once the number one spectator sport in America, and now I don't know, its races are like on the CW or something like that. And part of it is because NASCAR changed its rules and made up a playoff system that didn't make any sense. And like motorsports changed and people just like fell out of love with it. And if college football is in any way, shape, or form, liable to encounter a similar fate if it doesn't figure this stuff out.
So I get where that's coming from. I think there's a lot of things there that actually now the knot is receding slightly, because NASCAR was always a regional sport in a way that college football is a regional sport with what you love, but it is a national sport. Mm-hmm. Also, I think like the fabric of what ties you to a college football team is so much stronger than what ties you to an individual driver. Right. There are so many things that go into, because while you love a sport, there's something that's your entry point to the sport. And if your entry point to the sport is Tony Stewart, but then he's not driving anymore, it's like, well, what do I do now? If your entry point to the sport is Wisconsin football, mm-hmm. Wisconsin football is never going away. So I'm not as worried about that, but I'm worried about it becoming more of a, we understand the professionalization of college football, but I would like it to keep an amateur soul is not the way to say it, because it's not about whether you're paid or not, but that it's not quite the pros. It's not quite, because you're just connected to it a little more strongly, and there's more teams. There's not only, I think one of the good things about college football, right, is that you can really care about one of the big time teams, but maybe you're connected to a team that's in the G5. You love a MAC. I mean, we're in Ohio. There's a lot of people who went to a MAC school or love a MAC school and are Kent State or Miami of Ohio or Ohio University or Toledo or Bowling Green fans, but also root for Ohio State. And I think that that's like a really interesting like connection. That is a good thing about this sport. And there's just some of the soul of it. I'm for progress.
Soul's a good word. I think soul's a good word.
Progress is good. Losing your soul in the name of progress is the kind of thing they write folk songs about. No one wants me to write a folk song.
But has anything ever made as much money as college football has made and will continue to make and kept their soul? Because I don't think they have.
So are we asking it to be something that's never been done before?
It's never been done before.
But if anything could do it, could college football do it?
I guess we'll find out. I don't know.
I'm almost gonna. Now I'm thinking about grandpas and grandmas and taking their kids to games, and now I'm getting really upset. What are we doing to the sport? I get a lot of it. Okay, we're not going to figure it out today. We're not going to save college football today.
And it's not going to change tomorrow. So
it's not going to change tomorrow. We're going to have a good season.
Yeah.
Let's do some Ask KOTN questions before Doug has to go to the therapist and talk about all this. I want to try to come up. I feel okay. So askkotn@gmail.com. Askkotn@gmail.com. We got a lot of good responses about various things about the show itself that we asked people for their questions and comments. A lot of people just bringing up topics that we can discuss on the show. I've gone through some of them. We got a load since last week, and it is such a, when I open up the askkotn@gmail.com mailbag and I see a bunch of new responses in there from our dedicated, educated, loyal audience, man, that's what makes the knot go away, right? I love the ideas and the passion that people bring to this. So send us your thoughts on this and your fears about the future of college football, your beliefs that it will make it through the trials and tribulations and come out the other side different, but still great. The things that you think can be wonderful about the future of college football that maybe are substantially different from today, but you're almost excited for. I think this will help us, Bill, to get a handle on, because we want to hear from Pitt fans and Kansas State fans and Iowa State fans and West Virginia fans and Syracuse fans who might be on the outside looking in if this thing goes all the way to a top tier. But then we also want to hear from Michigan and Penn State and Oregon and Ohio State fans who would be in that top tier. But it's like, okay, well, you made it, but are you happy to be there? Is that what you want? Maybe you are. Maybe you're like, what are you talking about? Give me a 12-game schedule where Ohio State's playing Bama, Florida, Georgia, Oregon, Penn State, Michigan, LSU, Tennessee, and Notre Dame as a 12-game regular season. Give me that tomorrow. Like, that would be a plus of this, right? Yeah. So this will help us. Send in your questions and comments about this. Brian, this is a football question. Do you think it's possible that the Tavian St. Clair versus Bryce Underwood version of Ohio State versus Michigan is the biggest edition of the rivalry in the last 20 years? This is true Ohio versus Michigan. You got to love it. So what Brian is asking about here is Bryce Underwood is currently a freshman quarterback for Michigan, probably going to be the starter this year. He's from Detroit. Tavian St. Clair is a freshman quarterback at Ohio State. He's not going to be the starter this year because it's going to be Julian Sayin, but he is certainly the future of the position, and he's from Ohio, Bill. And the idea that you have two 5-star quarterbacks who stayed for their home state schools and then could face each other on the field in the greatest rivalry in college football, ooh la la. Now I'm excited again.
It'll definitely heighten it. Yeah, the thing that kind of, it doesn't stink. It's like, I'm excited to watch Julian Sayin play, but you're gonna have to wait 3 years probably to see that happen, or at the very least a year, because we don't want to wish injury or anything like that on Julian Sayin. I suppose that would allow even more opportunity for the excitement about that future matchup to build and build and build. But I also kind of wish we were getting it this year. If I could be honest, like I wait, like to see that start when they're both true freshmen and then build over the next 3 or 4 years. would be like incredible to chart. And it may end up that we only get one version of that particular matchup, because if Julian Sain's a starter for 2 years and Tavian St. Clair takes over in 2027, I guess that would be that could be Bryce Underwood's last year at Michigan.
Right.
So,
yeah, I don't want to necessarily fast forward to the 2027 Ohio State-Michigan game, but this is a little bit, it's a completely different conversation, but a little bit of a similar conversation to what was happening when Ryan Day and Ohio State picked Kyle McCord over JJ McCarthy in recruiting, and JJ McCarthy went to Michigan and was like, I'm going to told our guy Ari, like, I'm going to basically stick it to Ohio State. And we thought that two guys in the same class building to that, and then JJ McCarthy did like that. He did stick it to Ohio State. That actually happened. And I can remember like being excited for that, but that was like a recruiting thing. That wasn't a home state guy thing. So it's
and it only happened once.
It only happened once.
Yeah.
But even for this to be, and this is the thing again, I mean, we understand the transfer portal, we understand guys moving all over the place, but there is something, is there not, as we try to hold on to the roots and the soul of college football? How much do you think there's still a thing about a home state kid playing for his home state team, right? Lincoln Cure is going to be a tight end for Kansas State this year because he was the best player in the state of Kansas. Like, it would have been awesome to see him play at Nebraska, but there's still a little bit of a thing to it, right?
I think so. In Ohio, so the last Ohio State starting quarterback from Ohio was Braxton Miller, right?
Oh, now we're doing this. Yeah. Cause then,
because Joe Burrow never started, and they haven't had that many Ohio quarterbacks on the roster.
Well, Cardale Jones.
Well, yeah, I guess so. To like open the season as the starter. Well, I guess Cardale did too.
In 15.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
Cardale,
still been a while.
Yeah.
Because then you went from that to JT Barrett from Texas, Dwayne Haskins from Maryland, Justin Fields from Georgia, CJ Stroud from California. Kyle McCord from Philadelphia.
New Jersey.
Hey, so have you seen the movie The Brutalist? Have you watched it? No. So it was like Adrian Brody won the Academy Award for Best Actor from it. And it sounds like the name of it is The Brutalist. Do you know what it's about?
No.
It's about a guy building a rec center in Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
Oh, really? I thought it was like it's not a boxing movie.
It's about a guy building a rec center in the Philly suburbs. I couldn't believe it. There's a lot of stuff about like digging out the basement. Like it is like, I was like, I'm like 2/3 of the way through. It's a super long movie, but I was like, Landis has to watch this.
Yeah, maybe I'll check it out.
Will the rec center get built in the Philly suburbs or not? Oh, I mean, that's an Academy Award winning movie.
Yeah.
What are the greater things facing America? Will they build the rec center? I don't know. This is Jeffrey. Good question, Brian. Jeffrey had comments about the noon games for Ohio State, but there's a part of his note that I thought was interesting. As the husband of a 20-year Washington season ticket holder, noon is definitely an Eastern time zone problem. You're never going to have a big noon Eastern game at one of the West Coast Big Ten schools. However, our kickoffs are inconsistent and bounce around in an effort to get noticed, which makes for a crappy, inconsistent fan experience, especially for families. I thought this was because we understand we have a loyal group of Ohio State fans who partake in the show. We know there are probably some, Nebraska and Michigan and Penn State and maybe those more longtime Big Ten teams, Iowa, that are part of this. But this West Coast thing, because we care about our Northern West Coast teams, I think it's a very interesting question, Bill. For instance, Ohio State fans who are upset about so many noon starts versus this Washington existence being described of, my God, we're just trying to get on sort of a big time network game anywhere, and we'll play at any time to make that happen. And then also working, I mean, there's like 5 time slots that a West Coast team could be in, because there are going to be there's some Washington home games that I think that already came out that are like 11 Eastern start. So that's like an 8 local time start for Washington. But then, they played noon games Eastern last year on the road. Yeah. So you could, if you're a Washington fan, you could have a game start at 9 a.m. local time that you want to watch on TV, or you could have a game start at 8 p.m. local time that you want to watch on TV or go to in person, which is that's not a range that East Coast fans or Midwest fans have to deal with.
No, I've wondered if that, like, the idea of like waking up and having your breakfast and watching your college football team play, like, is that a bad thing? It's probably a bad thing. It's probably a bad thing, right? Me as a 36-year-old man who likes to get up and enjoy his coffee now, I almost like, oh, that sounds nice. But if I were not that, I could see why that would not be a desirable existence. Yeah, I mean, everyone's got problems, I think, right? And we tend to get in your own lane and get blinders on and only focus on what's affecting your team, and that's fine. But yeah, I guess I mean, I haven't considered like what West Coast fans might experience with the way they bounce, like not even time slots, like channels too. It's like we're playing 11:30 Eastern time game on FS6. It's like I don't know where that channel is. So,
so we're not doing it on this show. I mean, all the game times for the first 3 weeks came out at the end of last week, and I certainly went through. I've made our northern schedule for weeks 1, 2, and 3, and we have 27 northern games in week 1 because the only game where they're playing each other is Nebraska versus Cincinnati, and otherwise we have 27 of our northern teams who are playing somebody else. So it is just a reminder about that stuff. There's so like week 1, and then we know, of course, we have week 0. We have the Kansas State Iowa State game, and we have Kansas playing in week 0 also. But week 1, there's like Thursday games, there's Friday games. It's so distributed. I think there might even be 4 Thursday night games, 4 Friday night games, like 6 games at noon, 5 games in the midday window, 5 games at night, and it's just you get a reminder of the way TV creates this stuff, but you also get a reminder of college football fans are yanked all over the place in the name of making TV content.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, I'm really excited for week 1. It's like, awesome. Enjoy your Thursday night, which has happened to Ohio State before. You and I covered a Thursday night game at Minnesota one year. Yeah. And so like that, I don't know. I'm not saying that's bad because it gives some teams exposure on a Thursday night when there aren't as many games, but also, man, you get yanked around sometimes as fans, don't they?
You do. No, they definitely do. But actually, I see the value in it, at least like week 1, where you can bounce around a little bit, and you can't find your own time slot, I guess, unless you're the Sunday night or Monday night game. But you can be in a less crowded time slot than you would be most other weeks. So that's probably a good thing too.
Yeah. No, that's we have a Sunday night Notre Dame game then. So like we have. I was like working out like,
is that LSU Clemson?
I don't think so. It's like I when it comes to that kind of stuff, I know the South exists, but I was just doing northern stuff. But it's like I was trying to figure out when are we doing post game shows that weekend, and I was like, should we do a post game show Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night from week 1 because we have all these things happening, and I think it's not quite that, but we're gonna be busy.
We could get away with it. We got some interesting games in week 1, and I think Notre Dame Miami might warrant its own reaction, even if it's shorter. Oh no, Monday. Of course, this is what Monday night. TCU North Carolina.
Oh yeah, no, we're good. We'll just talk about that on Tuesday. Bill Belichick's first loss. Yes, Sunday night Notre Dame versus Carson Beck is pretty wheelhousey for us, right? Assuming he's back from his arm injury, and of course, we wish the best of health to Carson Beck in his recovery as the quarterback at Miami. Hey, our guy Buckhorn. Wanted to apologize for the email that you read on the Memorial Day podcast that came across way more harsh when I heard it out loud than it did in my head when I wrote it. So it's all good, Buckhorn.
That's all right.
It's all good. He said some nice things about us, but then my point of the email was that the show was starting to sound like thinly veiled Northern honkery. So like we're here for the kind of things. We're good.
We want honkery checked. So
yeah,
that's appreciated.
And also from our guy Phil, is there anything I can do to encourage Doug to never ever say the word honk or any derivatives again? Some people I think have adopted honkery the way we use it, and it's not like we invented it. Honk, troll, or moron, right? That's our favorite game show in the fall.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if there are other people who are disturbed by the word honk.
Honk is not a word that I knew, at least in this context, knew of until I was a professional sports writer, and then I was accused of being one. So yeah,
can't beat him, join him.
Yeah. I like when I get called a Buckeye honk in one tweet, and then the next week a Buckeye hater. I think that means I'm doing the job right.
That is how you're doing it right. This is Jason again. Just show ideas. Generally speaking, I hate when you have guests on. I like listening to you guys, even you, Doug. If I wanted to listen to those people, I'd listen to their shows. Exceptions, beat writers for teams. People do seem to like that insight of a beat writer. And then an exception, like super exception, this person said, Audrey Snyder. We have several people who love Audrey Snyder, who is excellent at her job and has great Penn State insight, and also will give it to us a little bit, which people like. So that certainly, we will keep that in mind. Let's see. Jay in Philly, also not a huge fan of guests. Podcasts for me are similar to sitcoms. I'm there to hang out with the people I like. A lot of times guests are either out of sync with the hosts, aren't familiar with the bits, or aren't people I enjoy listening to as much. Best guests for me are people who really get the show. And people also said they like Godfrey. So like we get that.
He gets the show.
Yeah. Daniel, have a Southern correspondent is a suggestion, which is something that we have batted around, that idea of having sort of a view from the South represented. And I do think it can be really good for a show to get like a regular rotation, so you get to know them, which is kind of what we're trying to do here. Sometimes you have on one-offs. I'm up for that. If we could find the right person with like just a view from the South for 20 minutes every week during the season, I think could be good.
Peter Burns.
Oh my God.
I'd watch you two guys yell at each other.
Oh my God. I got to meet that guy in person. Oh my God. Now I got a knot in my stomach again. It's back. Robert says, I'd rather when we were doing the North-South, the SEC Big Ten 1 through 16 showdowns. Robert, I'd rather be Wisconsin than LSU. Diehard fan pride and respectability are higher. LSU overinflated ego bandwagon fans. They only care during the wins. The rest of the time, they are SEC flavor of the week fans. How about that? That's a good email.
All right. Love that.
And then Derek said some nice stuff. As always, thanks for the great content, and F the SEC. In Jeremiah Smith's name we pray. Amen. So like we're getting some feedback. So I do think it's hard because I think having coaches and players on is like cool. And I think I don't want to say the word legitimizing. It's like, we're not trying to legitimize ourselves, but it's like, we care about your team. I was excited to have Donovan Ezraku from Boston College on the show last year. You know, I was like fired up about that. I was excited when we had Pat Narduzzi live on the show. I was glad we had a PJ Fleck interview, right? But I also get what people say. It slows down a little bit of like the vibe. So it doesn't mean we're never going to have players and coaches on.
Narduzzi was good. Narduzzi was good.
Yeah, he told some great stories. So it's like you want to get information from them. Like you want them to tell stories that you didn't know that influence your view of college football, right? But sometimes if it's just coach speak, or if it's a player who's not maybe used to doing media, I don't know. But I do think really informed beat writers can be really fun. And so we certainly will remain open to that. But we appreciate all the insight, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. More, as much feedback as we can get on like what you guys want the show to be. We'll take it for sure. Yes.
We are just conduits. We are all conduits. And when I'm mad, I try to be mad on your behalf. I'm not mad for me and Bill. I'm mad for, is this what Northern college football fans want and deserve? And, like we said, if you could fit 7 million people in a news conference, then we wouldn't exist, because everybody could just go and ask their question. So we'd love to have 7 million people joining us on the show, but that doesn't exist. So we try to think like you and serve you guys. So that's why we're here. And I'm sorry that I got a little emotional today. I'm not worried about college football, but I think along with everybody else, I'm frustrated by the people who maybe seem to be destroying a wonderful thing for the wrong reasons. If you're destroying it for the right reasons, great. I just care about your motivations. And then the other thing that what we started the show with, Bill, is like the PR battle here. I just don't want the Big Ten and the North to ever play second fiddle. Because I think when it comes to winning games on the field, as the last 2 national championships show, as the 5-1 record against the SEC Scott Docterman mentioned, and when it comes to making money, and you can look at the payout that the Big Ten is giving its members compared to the SEC, the Big Ten does not take a back seat. The North does not take a back seat. And when the Big Ten is silent, that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah.
And I don't like the implication. Because I think on the field, the players and coaches are working too hard for any implication that it should take a backseat anymore. And again, we are working on a project. We are knee deep in it. We understand what happened and where the North fell short. And I think we also understand what is happening now and why nobody should think or feel that way anymore. And when the SEC is spouting off for 4 days and the Big Ten says nothing, that's what it feels like to me again. And that I don't like. That vibe, I don't like.
No, neither do I. But I have also come around to the idea, like in the course of this episode, that perhaps there is value in not saying anything, and maybe that requires a little bit of recalibration in my own mind about that, because all it felt like to me was just the SEC like being out there, being present, as I said, like saying, getting its ideas on the table, kind of taking control of the national college football conversation for a few days. Meanwhile, the conference that has the last 2 national champions didn't say anything, and when it had the opportunity to say something the week before, no one knew about it. So it's just it's a weird dynamic. I don't know what's right or wrong, to be honest, but it's strange. But maybe there is a value in the longer term play for the Big Ten by not saying anything.
Okay, no showdown today because we had too much PR to talk about. Wednesday, we'll get back to a KOTN showdown, and we're pretty sure it is going to be Michigan versus Utah. Both teams dipped last year. We've been saying buy the dip on Utah. I think these programs in style of play are pretty interesting, and there's a lot of dissimilarities, obviously. But I think it's an interesting comparison here. Who would you rather be in 2025? So I think we're going to get down to the Utes and the Wolverines, and then we'll continue showdowns through the next several weeks until we cover all 28 of our Northern teams. As always, thanks to you guys for being here, whether it's in the YouTube chat, whether it's listening back on a podcast, whether it's watching back on YouTube. The idea is not to pander to you guys, but it is just to appreciate you guys and understand that we're just here to represent and reflect your passion and your knowledge and your feelings about Northern college football. Thanks, as always, to our producer, Mike Yorstowski, for making us look good and sound good. We will see you Wednesday. It is Monday right now. We'll see you Wednesday. Thanks, as always, for being here. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.